I remember setting up 5 or 6 interviews with startup CEOs. I would go into them, have a coffee, like, how can I do it? Let's have that conversation. And at the end of each of those discussions, I left with a job offer.
Welcome to the Reality Capture Network, where we focus on technology-driven innovation, education, and community. The Reality Capture Network, bringing the future to you. On this episode of the RCN Podcast, the co-founder and CEO of AllVision IO, Aaron Morris.
We had a senior project in college that was building a little autonomous robot, and I just fell in love with that. I was like, can I do this forever? The engineer on site is like, wow, that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Like, that hooked. Within, probably 4 or 5 months of releasing that, we were in discussions and eventually acquired by AutoDesk.
How do we get to that next level of global digital twins?
Because there's still not one device solves all problems.
What is needed for the basis of the future of digital twins, of being able to use all these robotics and autonomous and virtual, is where I think the term Metaverse comes into play.
It's not really feasible for human labor force to go out and document these things and keep them up to date. The only way we're going to get there is through sensors and through AI technology. That's the only way.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Reality Capture Network podcast. Today, we have a guest that I'm really excited to talk with. I've known for a few years here, Mr. Aaron Morris. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This is fun.
It is. One of the reasons I love the podcast so much, and part of how we started out with guests, is we've met people over the years in the industry, we've built relationships, we've heard stories, and a lot of the time, those just kind of stick with those individuals. The thing I love about the podcast is finally getting to dig a little deeper and then also share that with the community so people get to hear the behind the scenes and hear the stories. And so I'm excited to dig in with you, knowing that you've got a fun story. But the first thing we want to do is start back like we do with everybody. I want to start all the way back, however far you want to go. I like to hear the journey of what you grew up around, maybe into the story of what inspired you to get into the industry you got in, in school. So take us back.
Sure. Okay. I always usually start my origin story by the time I hit grad school, because that's where, to me, things got fun. But I grew up in West Virginia. I had fairly, normal childhood. I did have a sweet high school car. It was a 1987 black Pontiac Firebird, and this is important because it plays a pivotal role now in my current company. But, I was always into technology, and then parents got first kind of PC. I immediately wanted to load it with games. This was the back in the day where you put floppies into computers, and they were virus-ridden. And there was one game a friend gave me, and I popped it in, and sure enough, I destroyed the computer. And I have very wonderful parents, and they said, you have to fix it now. And so I remember that was the first introduction to boot disk and reformatting hard drives and installing operating systems and even some light level programming. And that's what kind of kicked me off. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And then so when I was starting looking at kind of career trajectory, looking at colleges, I go with the flow, and, family will say, oh, well, you're good at science, you're good at math, why don't you be an engineer? I'm like, I'm not even sure I know what that is, but sounds fun. And then when I started looking at programs, it was computer science as well. So I said, yeah, throw me in computer science. And so I ended up getting a dual in electrical engineering and computer science with a minor in math. And that sets you up really well for, the world of robotics. I'd say one of the very fortunate things for me was to go to Carnegie Mellon University and do my graduate studies there. Wonderful school at the time again. And once I hit the senior, we had a senior project in college that was related to building a little, autonomous robot. And I just fell in love with that, and was like, can I do this forever? So then I went, I found a handful of schools, and I, applied to all of them, got into Carnegie Mellon as the master's, stayed for the PhD. And it was there that I got bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. A lot of CMU faculty have side hustles.
Okay.
And my advisor was not unlike, he was like all the rest. And so I started doing work with autonomous mobile robots, so things that drive themselves around. And we got funding coming out of it was a disaster in Q Creek in Pennsylvania, where 9 miners got trapped underground. They breached an abandoned mine that was flooded. They got trapped in an air pocket. They were eventually all rescued. It's a great story. But we got some funding to research, like, could there be robotic or, imaging technology that could have perceived the abandon, or how close the miners were from this breach to avoid that problem. And I ended up developing this little borehole deployable laser scanner. You drill a hole, drop it, it kind of unfolds down, does a 360 scan, images the void as my, idea for how to address it. And I ended up having a little survey for
nice
all of my PhD, just going around the country and scanning. And the very first time I took this duct tape contraption to it was a landfill that was kind of over top of an abandoned mine, and they backfilled it, were supposed to backfill it, and they breached this one void, and they couldn't see how far it was or how big it was. So called the university. He's like, do you have something? We got the guy, we got the technology. So we drove out there, and I with duct tape, never built anything that was, intended to survive. When I got there, it was like mud and rain. I'm like, oh, as soon as I take it out of the car, it's going to short, it's dead. It didn't, it got down there, it scanned, and then I had a laptop running the device, a 3D void, or 3D model, the void popped out. The engineer on site, mouth dropped. He's like, wow, that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. That hooked.
What time frame was that? What year was this around?
That was probably 2002, 2003, somewhere.
That's pretty early for something like that.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I thought, this stuff was the norm. I just didn't realize it. And once I got out of school, I realized how much we really had access to technology. But yeah, I fell in love with the idea you could use technology and solve really, real life problems, make people's life better, make the world better. So I've been on the entrepreneurial journey ever since.
That's cool. One question. So you mentioned part of what pushed you into the entrepreneurship side is, people around you at the university. And did you have any entrepreneurs or business owners in your family or anything like that?
Yeah, we did actually. Although I didn't spend my grandparents on my father's side. They'd kind of own various shops, cards and collectibles, and so I done that. My father did real estate. He had a few businesses he had started as well. But to be honest with you, I never knew that was a career trajectory or opportunity. I always thought the model was go to school, go to college, get a job, climb the ranks, retire. That was it.
And so it was really born out of getting excited about the technology and figuring out that you can solve a problem, and then that pushes you into...
No, you got half of it. The technology and applying technology to real applications got me very excited. But even at that, I was still not in the mindset that I could do a company. I got exposed to a lot of kind of, being part of a small group and deploying this, but I never still had the notion that like I could do a startup. It wasn't before I joined a startup and I met the executive CEO and just saw what he was doing. I'm like, wow, if this guy can do it, anybody can. Like,
yeah.
I underestimated how hard entrepreneurship is. I think as everyone who gets into it, there's a bit of a fantasy element. Like, everyone wants to be Steve Jobs or Musk or whoever your hero is. But then when you get into it, you realize it's a grind.
Oh yeah.
And so you really have to believe in what you're doing and keep at it, even when everything else says, no, let's tap out.
Yeah. What, in fact, while we're on that vein, what is it when you started, you got into the entrepreneurship side, you started growing a business, which I'd love to hear even some of the story of that, but like, what are some of the things for you when it did hit hard times or difficulties? What is it that helped you push forward with it as opposed to where so many people, kind of give up or stop at those difficulties? What was like some of your reason why or something that motivated you to go through all of that?
Pride. I'm like,
hey,
again, I never do anything that I don't feel is important or has material impact. Like, there's certain things, and I won't get into exactly what this, that the world gets caught up on and gets all a buzz, and it seems like, oh, I should be into that and do it, and I don't do it because, again, I actually don't. Again, I'm of the mindset that there's a chance that anything is possible, but if I don't fundamentally understand why it's important or how it benefits us, I just let somebody else do it. It won't be for me. But the other half of it is, for me, is I don't like to fail. So, and I think that runs in my family. And that is a huge motivator. So even when things like get rocky, the fear of it, like not working out and that coming back to you is all to like, I guess, fuel you need to keep pushing through. And to be honest with you, that's one of the things I feel anybody who has that kind of mindset and does a startup, they have to either learn to cope with it or, succumb in the process. And so for me, it was because basically, as I've come to realize in all of this, like, you control almost nothing. In fact, you probably control nothing. You're a bystander in all of this. You feel like you have control, but you don't. And so you have to come with to grips with the fact that, like, you can work very hard, you can be the brightest, you can hire the best, you can do all the right things, and you can still fail incredibly. So what you have to do is, at the end of the day, be in a position to live with that. And if you can do that, you will be just fine. And for me, it was working very hard. So my first startup, and subsequently, you work like a crazy person, and that makes you feel you can live with yourself if it goes sideways.
Man, a lot of truth in there. I think anybody who has started and built something agrees.
For sure.
I'd love to hear a little bit because I think it sounds like, and I don't know all of your story, but I think you've owned or founded or started multiple businesses. Could you take us through, what a couple of those were and some of that story? So
yeah, the first business was, again, that little kind of side hustle I had in grad school, and that's what gave me the spark. I then here's an interesting story, because I tell a lot of people this was eye-opening to me. I wanted to do a startup coming right out of grad school. The moment I finished my PhD, all my colleagues, friends were going out applying resumes, interviewing, going academia, going to research labs. And all I wanted to do was start a company. I knew I was very techie. I didn't have really a business background. So I took the sort of on myself to go educate myself, and talking to people is the best way to do that. So I remember setting up 5 or 6 interviews with startup CEOs, primarily in the tech scene around Pittsburgh. And I would go into them, have a coffee, and just like no agenda. I just want to like seem like here, like tell me your story, tell me how you did it, like how can I do it? Let's have that conversation. And at the end of each of those discussions, I left with a job offer. It's like,
yeah,
they're like, come work for me, kiddo, and I'll show you the ropes, and you'll be a great entrepreneur one day. And it was eye-opening because, like, again, here was all my friends, struggling and resumes and all that, and I just walked in and invited coffee and left with an offer. I actually ended up taking one of those. I was looking to spin out that first company, and then I realized that the people around the table were very much technical. I didn't have the business acumen to feel comfortable leading the charge. And so decided to do what I like to call School of Hard Knocks, MBA. I joined one of the companies that gave me the job offer, but I joined in a sales role to really learn sales business development. And I spent a year. Company's called Seagrid. They still around. They sell robotic sort of logistics equipment, forklifts, pallet jacks, those kinds of things. And it was great. It was a year. They had just released their first product, so it was like got to see firsthand product market fit, and winning customers, and the ups and downs, and doing demos, and things going great, things going not so great. Trade shows, got to live it all. So after about a year, I started to get a few. I'd done some work with General Motors back in grad school. There was a few other companies I had consulted for, and their sort of laser LiDAR processing. And they started coming back to me and said, "Hey, you remember that stuff you did when you were at grad school? We need more of that. And can you help us out?" So I started a company called All Point Systems. It started just as a consulting gig where I would, help them process data. For General Motors, it was in support of kind of their early autonomous vehicle programs. I was helping characterize their other sensors like radars and stereo cameras and other things with LiDAR. And then that quickly evolved into a products company, and I started looking at applying the software techniques that we were using at General Motors, but how they would work in the geospatial survey market, primarily as applied to transportation. So we ended up building. Now I look back and realize it was some of the earliest software for mobile mapping. Yeah, and this is a technologist starts a company. They dive in to solve the tech problem. They don't take a hard look at how big is the market, where is it going, and I'm like, well, SaaS is really popular. I built a SaaS company for mobile mapping LiDAR, and like maybe at the time there was a dozen of these systems in the world.
Yeah.
So I really didn't plan that one out well. So. Fortunately, we had been doing some work with General Motors, and they introduced us to what they called their central layout group. So it's a division that, does all the terrestrial laser scanning for their powertrain and other facilities. And they started talking to us about, they were like, so tired of people dragging these scanners around. Why can't a robot do it? And like, so... as the roboticist, I was like, can you build a robot to do that? I'm like, yeah, sure, I can build a robot for it. So we ended up taking on a robot project to, have this thing drive around, an active powertrain facility to scan it. And I just remember like what a trip that was, because I'm a roboticist, but I'm primarily software, and I feel very comfortable in that. Hardware, I like working with it. I just saw like manufacturing, producing it for product. But anyway, we made this thing. We piloted it. We tried it. It was it worked, and then a forklift almost took it out in an instant. And I'm like, okay, I can't do this. But somebody said, well, Spar 3D is coming up. This back in the day was called Spar 3D.
Yep.
And it was like, I think people enjoy seeing this. You want to take it to the trade show? I'm like, sure. So we ended up taking this, and people loved it. I remember like the giving the talk, and it was like people were lined outside, and we had all like tired 3 or 4 days or whatever the conference was. We had the robot running around and scanning, and I think that put Allpoint and myself on the map. But in that, I think it was during one of the receptions, I won't name who, but one of the principals of one of these survey firms came up to me, and he was like, slightly slurred speech, but he was like, I don't care at all about that robot. But he goes, that software you got's interesting. Because we had, with the robot, like the scans, once they were done, were kind of, Wi-Fi transmitted back to a laptop, and the laptop was running cloud-to-cloud registration, which at the time was very, very new, very novel.
Oh, yeah.
And so went away from that, said, you know what, let's not do the robot, but let's focus in on this scan-to-scan registration. And we built, I remember it was very quickly, we pivoted, kind of went away from the mobile mapping market, focused on terrestrial laser scanning, built out a few different software packages, primarily around the registration, dabbled in, the vectorization, but the registration, that caught the attention of AutoDesk. And that's when we, within, probably 4 or 5 months of releasing that, we were in discussions and eventually acquired by AutoDesk. For me, it was awesome because I got to like start the company, grow the company, exit the company. And I got to join a world-class team to start a new product line at Autodesk called Recap. I remember like, all of the people in the survey industry were, using Leica products, using Fera products. They all had their versions of it. Like, why is Autodesk doing this? But we really wanted to, break down the silos and like,
yeah.
Because I think it's different now, but back in the day it was, if you were a Leica only house, or you were Fera only house, or a ZNF only, like you just put the badge on and like, whose team were you on? And
yep.
Everybody specialized in a thing. And there was clearly the benefit would be for you to own a variety of different products and apply them to the use case. But that's not how laser scanners were sold back then. And so you used their scanner, their software, and that was it. So when we got to Autodesk and we put Recap together and the registration was part of it, we tried to make it, because Autodesk is very much about democratization. We tried to make, laser scanning accessible to a broader user base than had been before. And we tried to make it, didn't matter what scanner you used, you can bring it in, you can use it in the portfolio of products. And that was a really fun time for me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I remember when the registration module Recap first came out and we started playing with it, and it was man, it was a game changer. Like cloud to cloud was not a popular thing prior to that in a lot of softwares. It was and target based for smaller jobs. It just added so much complexity, and it really started that wave. And just like in laser scanning, you see somebody comes up with some of that first piece of it, and now it's like, okay, it opens the eyes, and more people start adopting, and obviously now, Recap is used by so many people. It's been a huge support to the industry.
Yeah. Again, I can't speak for it for the past 5 years since I haven't been there. So
yep.
You guys can say whatever you want about it now.
Early on, though, yeah.
but at the time, we tried very hard to do something like for everybody. We tried to like not take a side, try to lift all boats.
Yeah.
And I just remember the flack we would get because they're like, especially in the survey industry, a lot of people, the idea of making this workflow usable by somebody who's not in the craft or survey trained seemed like sacrilegious. Like, why are you doing this? Like, you're gonna just let anybody come in. You're gonna get people coming in and like doing terrible jobs, and then it's gonna spoil it. Nobody will want to buy services from anybody. And we were like, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like this is happening.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
And I think that is, when you look at the history of scanning and data and models and all that, and the technology that existed 10 years ago and then 5 years ago and today, everything has become easier and cheaper and more accessible. And so, it has spread out into so many different hands, and there's so many different devices that have different capabilities and different accuracies. And so, I think there's some people in the industry, and we try to educate a lot on that, right? Like, people that are going to go out and buy gear or get into a software need to have a good understanding of what is your use case, how accurate do you need it to be, and then reverse engineer, here's the solutions I need to use and the workflows I need. And I think that has been lacking in the industry in whole. But at the same time, it's been way more beneficial than it is harmful for all of that to happen. For the technology to spread, things become easier and cheaper. It's increasing the adoption, and it's creating more applications across a lot of industries and use cases.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, I feel part of some of the evolution of this world in a positive way that came from, that, I'm not saying specifically Recap, but like kind of that evolution is like now we have such a diversity of capture equipment and technologies. I always wanted to see SLAM kind of take, a big prominent role, and it's still getting there, but I think we're getting closer and closer to realizing that, the potential of it. But like you said, because now there's all this diversification and specialization, you need some education on what things apply, because there's still not like one device solves all problems. And again, what tools you use. But I do think we're in a world where you don't have to be a surveyor necessarily. You don't have to train for apprentice for 4 years before you're officially allowed to touch a scanner. With some basic understanding, some tools, and getting access to this technology, you can actually do some meaningful work.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's the increase in the demand for these types of technologies and tools and data has been growing like crazy over the last several years, and more markets are adopting it. Again, we look back 10 years ago when we're talking about some of this early stuff, it's like it was so expensive, it took a long time, it was really only big, critical, expensive projects that could adopt it. Now it's like you can pull out your phone and scan your bedroom, like it is becoming cheaper, easier, the demand's growing, and it also creates a lot of opportunity still in new ideas, new workflows, new softwares, and even career opportunities that, like you're saying, you don't have to go to college for 4 years to learn how to scan. And there's companies who need people to scan and need people to process data and so it's still a very exciting time, and I feel like we're still at the bottom of what I think is a pretty massive growth curve from what I see.
No, I think you and I are biased because we've been in this and wanting it to happen for a while. But I do feel like although it's hard to say, I haven't felt like on the cusp of something big for a while. But to me, like the idea that the notion of the digital twin and the all of what it can enable, it seems like we're in that world, or there's a lot of bets for that world and the need for that. Again, full circle. I mean, I'm a roboticist, and like I got into this space because I believed it was a key foundation. It's a foundational pillar to making robotics, autonomous robotics, is like we talk about work. I think it's a key to making smart cities work. I think it's a key to making augmented, virtual reality, mixed reality, whatever you want to call it, work. Like all of this, like very hyped, people get very excited by it. At the end of the day, you need a quality and fairly accurate digital representation of the real world as a component to making those applications work.
Yeah.
To me, it was very interesting, and that's how my current company kind of was born. If these were colleagues of mine going out and starting autonomous vehicle companies, and everybody very excited about that, and I'm like going around to people who, again, surface level knowledge, are like, can you imagine one day you'll just hop on a car and nobody driving and you'll take you somewhere? I'm like, yeah, but do you know that car requires a map? You're like, it actually already knows where it's going, every stop sign, every lane it has to be in, the moment you get in it. And if it doesn't have that, it can't go. It doesn't drive like you and me. And so all of these companies, at the end of the day, modulo Tesla, but we can't get into that. They're map makers, every one of them. Even like drone companies that, if you want to pilot a drone, like you have to have some level of map if you want to get to more like delivery. Like you need to have that context, that reference. And so without it, you cannot do. You're just selling a vision. You're raising money. You're building some cool demonstrations, but you're actually never going to be able to deploy in a real commercial way.
Yeah.
So I feel because a lot of investment has went into that, the future of these things, that you now have to pull the digital representations with you. So it is a fairly exciting time. But again, who knows, right? I feel it's always been an exciting time.
It is. I mean, and hey, that's how you also stay excited about work, is you find excitement in where you are now and where you think it's going. And the other thing I like to tell people when we talk about these ideas of the future is somebody has always thought about what the future is, and somebody has to actually take the steps to make it happen, or it never happens. Things don't just happen by themselves. Like, so when our community and when our industry and brilliant people have ideas, like the fact that some of them step out and take action to build something that gets another step further, that's how we get to that vision. And I agree with you a lot. In fact, I'd love to dig even deeper down some of that, but I think it's also a cool time to hear the story a little bit about, you see all of this, and now how did you move into your next company?
I'd been at AutoDesk for 5 years. Recap had, it was working. There was leadership change at the time at AutoDesk. Andrew stepped up, Carl departed. Again, and at that time, that's when autonomous vehicles had really kind of come into their own. There was a lot of excitement around it. The AI tool sets had started, they were released. So now, if you wanted to use AI, you didn't have to build your own from scratch, like neural network, or like you could leverage capability that was brought to you by some of the biggest companies out there. So when that sort of confluence of things was happening, I took a look at, what was doing Autodesk and what was happening in the outside world, and, an entrepreneur gets bit. So
again,
and also I felt, AllPoint had, I was very happy how that one ended, but it also, I was unsatisfied because I started off in the sort of geospatial transportation side of the world. Like, I was a big believer in the digital maps that would fuel a lot of what, this autonomy and robotics would be doing. And I thought, this is the moment. This is where maps finally, become a critical path to laying, the future for all of this. And so at that point, I felt like Recap was going its direction. It was, in there, and I stepped out and with a handful of others, and basically started again in the area that kind of left off. So at the time, again, with AllPoint, there wasn't that many mobile mappers, and now like every car in theory was going to be a mobile mapper. So that was very intriguing, and so where the thesis of AllVision came in was, because there's going to be now more data out there than ever before, it's going to be the opposite problem. Whereas before, getting data was so hard, now it's really like, can I get this data to be meaningful to somebody in a very quick and sort of reliable time frame? And so we started AllVision with the idea we're going to leverage AI, machine learning, some of the greatest technologies, because and I've gave a few talks on this topic. Like, I feel that like because of just the scale of the geospatial world, and it's miles and miles, hundreds of miles, states, like very large swaths of area, but you're looking for assets, like fire hydrants and like markers on the ground. So it's tiny. So like it's not really feasible for human labor force to go out and document this thing that keeps them up to date. The only way we're going to get there is through sensors and through AI technology. That's the only way. So we decided to create the platform that was going to be that layer between the data and a consumer of the ultimate information, and build APIs that allow people to access. And that's what we did. So we started the company. We partnered with some of those early autonomous car companies. We brokered. We're going to be like that, information broker, take their data, work it, and then put it into a format that would be consumable in an Autodesk product, an Esri product, a Bentley product, and figure out like, okay, what is this clump of LiDAR or this, image, what's in it? Like, and how do I translate it back into this deliverable? So started working with cities and municipalities to do things like inventory their assets. I mean, that's some of the most surprising discoveries in, this current company is like, how much stuff is out there and people just don't know where it's at.
Oh yeah.
Or what state it's in. Like I remember, one of my favorite stories, and I'll poke at Pittsburgh cause I'm here. But we were actually doing some looking at curb analysis. So mapping curb and all the, assets that were specialized to parking and putting them on a map. And one of the GIS leaders from the city came to us and said, "Hey, can you find streetlights?" And we're like, "Sure. Why do we want to do that?" And they're like, "Well, like, we're trying to get to a point where we're going to permit these streetlights for small cell installation so that we can have 5G, and our current maps are not very up to date. I'm like, well, can you show me your current map? And they send me an Excel spreadsheet, and then the location, if there's anything marked, is something like, it's not all that long. It's like, yeah, it's somewhere on Forbes, next to the stairs. I'm like, wow, okay, that's where we're at. And so, you know, that was again a great example where we took third-party data. So I think that one was a mixture of one of the AV companies in town took their data, took the downtown North Shore area, and just like we trained a classifier to find streetlights, and boop, out pop all the locations, lat longs. We gave it an image. We even did some basic measurements, like how tall they were. We had hoped at the time to do things like classification of whether or not it was LED, or read an asset tag. I think the images that we had at the time really weren't conducive to that, so we couldn't do that part. But, you know, now we went from like, you know, Excel spreadsheet to almost like a Google Maps type of interface, like give me the stop sign, like boop, here they are. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been finding all kinds of really interesting applications, everything from, again, enabling, 5G rollout to curb analysis for parking inventory, ADA compliance, looking at location of bus stops and ramps. And those are just the city things we've been doing for just statewide DOTs. We've been, documenting roads and paint lines and curbs, barriers, reading signage. We've been at freight rail, looking at crossings and signals and switches. There's a lot of infrastructure, and some of it's not just like build me an inventory. Sometimes it's just like I have an inventory, a third party build it for me. I have no way of validating it. Yeah. Like, can you be a third party and just check this for me? So we've done a number of just validation projects as well. So it's been good, really fun. But again, what gets us excited is at the core, we do have this really, really phenomenal AI technology. And I know that now we're in this, like, AI's having a moment. Yes. I can't talk to anybody like, have you tried that Chat GPT? Yeah. It's on my phone. Like, yeah, but like, but like, I mean, again, there's a little, it does impress you. But it's also a little bit of like that first time, like the filters came out to give you like the funny ears or a dog nose, like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah. But then it's like, that's all it does. It gives you a dog nose. And so I think, again, the possibilities and the warnings, like, I think there's some real considerations, but at the same time, it is a tool. And like any tool, you have to develop it. You've got to use it properly. You got to set expectations. You got to manage the expectations. There's, again, for us, I guess similar, harkening back to like everybody has to be a surveyor. Like, there is a lot of people who just go in thinking like, oh, I know how to use this framework, and I can throw a bunch of images and find assets, and I can do what you do. I'm like, no, it is actually quite complicated, and there's a lot that goes into it. But no, it's like quite a solid journey now, and I think we're just at the starting point of it as well. That's great. And I think that is, again, one of the next big needs in the industry, which, obviously you do too, which is why you're down that, is like you said, historically it was more like, oh, we need to find someone to capture this, or there's not that much data. Now it's so much data. The next area that the whole industry needs in all levels of data processing is
how do we get deliverables out of this faster? And because there's not a huge skilled workforce to take all this data and do all these models and all these drawings, especially when we're talking about how do we get to that next level of like global digital twins or thousands of facilities or roadways. Or so I when people ask me what I hope or think is next, I'm like, I think we're far enough on a lot of the hardware. And of course, it's great when new features come out or it gets a little faster. But the next big improvement, I think, is in the software side of what we do with the data or the automation of getting to analyzing it or deliverable creation. And so it's great to see you still down that journey of kind of taking that road on the AI side and extraction. And I'm kind of curious, you're talking about your initial focus around like roadways and mobile data. Do you have any path or thought or vision around doing something similar with interior data or buildings or, classifying and pulling assets out of that type of information or anything?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this journey started actually, again, starting to look at that, at least think about it when we were at AutoDesk.
Yeah.
It comes back to, and to me, like, I feel that data creation and data usage are like intertwined. Like, I remember giving a talk when I was part of AutoDesk, comparing like, okay, what really is laser scanning? Like, how could you describe it but not use the words laser? I was like, well, it's like teleportation, right? I can beam myself or beam the environment to me so I don't physically have to be there, right? It's time travel. I can go back into a moment that predated me and look around and be in a space and not have to, wonder or look over my shoulder because if somebody took a picture here, they missed that thing in the corner. And so I feel that the use of the data is just as important as the creation of the data, because virtually walking a site and taking measurements, modeling, finding assets, doing attribution, that can be just as if not more time consuming than actually doing the thing in the physical world. And so you're going to sort of lose your momentum if you can't just like, okay, here's the data and then out pops some, here's the basic information.
Yeah.
Here's a floor plan. Here's a layout. Here's, just give me where the windows are in a room. Find the fire extinguishers. I feel like that is a key enabler to, again, the growth of the overall industry. We did at AllVision, we did a brief stint with the National Science Foundation in which we explored with Oregon State University the use of, kind of our framework and platform for training scan to BIM as instead of scan to GIS, if you will. And in that time frame, the results were very encouraging. The nuance of working with buildings, though, is you do get higher degrees of variation in the quality of capture.
Yeah.
Not that you don't get variations in outdoor, but if you look at the number of individuals out there with this equipment doing this digitization and the manufacturing, it is something that's like a little more consistent. And whereas in the building world, there's just so many different people and so many different scanners. And so if you're going to try to build a framework around it, it's as long as it's consistent, it's great. But the moment you get some variation, you get noise, you get some inexperienced people doing the scanning, then that makes it a much more difficult challenge to do those types of analytics. So
you almost have to have a guideline of, hey, if you're using this product, this is the guideline for the capture process for it to be successful.
Absolutely. Whereas you can go the other way in the mobile mapping world, you can just say, hey, we know the common issues we see with mobile mapping, whereas in the terrestrial and sort of building capture industry, it is very much like if they knew how registration worked, if they knew that you have to have like shadows are terrible because you have to infer what's behind the shadow, like maybe you could capture it, I remember at Autodesk when I also had a photogrammetry engine, and the consumer group had this thing called 123D Catch. And when they first launched, it was a mobile app, and we were telling people, look, you can make 3D objects of anything. Just take a bunch of pictures, and boom, out pops 3D. And people would they take like a laptop, they take a front picture of it, they walk behind, take a back picture, they submit, and
it's broken.
Why didn't this work? It's broken. It doesn't work. And so they actually, I remember, then spent a lot of time trying to build a user interface around trying to force people to take the right types of pictures at the right type of spacing with the right types of overlap to get a quality result out. And I think that really, has to come to bear here. It's it's a combination of again, like you said, educating people, what's the next step? What does it have to be to be successful? And then how do I use the tools to get that one?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think even that's a big challenge, and one that we're trying to help with. We saw that gap in education, and we're like, man, the more conversations we can have, the more explanations. I feel like there's certain areas of the industry that need some standard guidelines and workflow documentation, or maybe even certification in certain processes of how you capture for certain industries. And it's so all over the place. And that's one of the difficulties we see, is that even though it's been around for a long time, the fact that there's so many devices and so many processes now, there are just as many people getting into it for the first time today as there are already doing it. The adoption is growing now, and yet the people getting started don't know the difference. They don't know, why is this scanner 10,000 and then 20 and then 50 and 150, and what's survey, and why can't I just take this data on a laptop? And it's there's nobody really helping fill that education piece of how you get to certain end goals, and so we do see people grab the wrong device and do it for the wrong application, and it doesn't work. And then, like you're saying, they don't have that knowledge yet of the registration, and why can't I extract data now? And I'm like, man, we have to solve some of that in order for, I think, the adoption to keep going and slow down on some of the maybe misuse of technology even. But I think it's still all positive because the growth is happening and it's becoming more efficient, and I'm really excited to see where you guys take your software as well. And the reason I ask on the terrestrial and the buildings, and you talk about those stories of the working with municipalities or the roads, and people don't know where their assets are, and we see the same thing in buildings and in facilities, and owner operators that have hundreds or thousands of buildings that are we don't even know what we have. We don't even know our square footage. We don't know how many rooms are in our buildings. We don't know what's occupied. And the current process for doing a lot of that is very time consuming, very manual. It's not repeatable. And this is where we see some of the vision of the digital twins and the future of an owner like that being able to have a digital representation of all of those assets, where they're located, be able to take that data and sort out and say, here's all the occupied, here's where all your signs are, here's how many XYZs do I have. Automation is going to help tremendously expedite the possibilities of all that data.
Yeah, no, well, two things popped in my mind as you were talking about that. One is there's what I learned, again, very early on at Autodesk is for the longest time, the as design is used as the as built. And that is never the case. And which dovetails into my second, the story. I remember the acquisition was pretty fresh. We had some people, some of, the corporate headquarters in San Francisco, some people from San Francisco from AutoDesk down, and they I don't know how they connected dots or got involved, but there's the courthouse in Pittsburgh is beautiful. It's old, it's like a castle. It might have a moat, or one time I had a moat. Who knows? But it's you had to go to like the National Archives to find the original construction documents. But they've been talking about doing a digitization project for the courthouse, and so we were getting kind of a walking tour, and it's amazing. Again, it's castle at the bell tower. But I remember we walked into one courtroom, and we're having this this exact conversation, because there was some Autodesk folks there, and there was some people from the courthouse that were there, and they were talking about how things were out of date or wrong. And it just like on cue, like we had planned it, this engineer had a toolbox, or maybe some sort of facilities manager guy comes in with a toolbox, steps into the courtroom, and then stops dead in his tracks and looks at this wall that kind of divides the entry of where we came into the courtroom, and his mouth drops and he goes, "That's not supposed to be there," and immediately bolts out of the room. So I'm like, what? So yeah, I mean, I love the idea of digital twins for buildings and using AI technology to keep those up to date for the exact same reasons I like it for the outside world. Again, it's good to have a record. It's primarily you can plan well, you can do facility managers, all these other applications, but you can also same automation idea, robotics, smart this and that, apply when you've got good digital records, up-to-date digital records of buildings.
Yeah, and I don't know how you feel about this term, but some of what you were talking about with what is needed for the basis of the future of digital twins, of being able to use all these robotics and autonomous and virtual, is where I think the term metaverse comes into the play. And even for our industry, kind of like digital twins now, I feel the metaverse is the same, right? There's so many different meanings to so many different people. And one is, entertainment, and you're entering a virtual space and seeing your friend and playing tennis. And the other is, to me, I look at that term and the hype that's going around and all these technologies, and I see that, to me, the metaverse is the future of all of that completed. And accessible. It is, the world is mapped, the assets on the world, the roads, the buildings, the airports, the ability to use autonomous and use robotics and have, what the future of our smart glasses will be, to be able to have companies overlay digital advertisements and wayfinding, and all of that is needed, I think, for the future of what those technologies will look like. But that's what I keep saying is I think that is the metaverse. The metaverse is the future of geospatial accurate digital twins globally, and the applications these technologies will have.
I agree with that. I do think, like a lot of terms, they can be overused and overgeneralized. And I remember speaking to colleagues because the metaverse really came into its own. I mean, crypto and other things were in play, because now you could own digital real estate, and you could capture it and this. So it really thought there was with NFTs, economic, really get rich quick, right? Invest now, blow up. And I think a lot of that got mixed in and sort of to a slight detriment to the idea of a metaverse. But I do think you're right. To me, having a digital representation of a world that kind of sits up and informs, again, whether it's an API to a vehicle that's trying to navigate a hallway or a road, whether it's a smart device that knows how to switch from one antenna to the other because it actually knows where it's at or where those things are located. Again, application after application, Meta is just information about like what's out in the physical world, what's real. And, I feel like all of humanity would be so much better. Like all that, like, I don't know. To me, it's like truth is truth, right? Like, you have a digital representation, you ask it questions, it answers you. There's no ambiguity to that. Whereas in the world, we're like, maybe something's bad out there. I don't know. Let's throw money at it anyway, And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that works. Maybe you could better spend that money with something else as opposed to just thinking that there's a problem, not knowing there's a problem. But no, I feel like humanity benefits from a better understanding of the real world, and we get that through the digitization.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we could talk for like 12 hours. I want to be respectful of your time and start narrowing down as well. But another thing that comes to mind, just because you are so deep in the technology and the AI and, something else that comes up around some of these topics, and I'm curious to get your perspective on is there anything about the AI piece that you think is you're afraid of, or the idea of like some of this AI getting to the point it's taking over certain things or it's thinking on its own? How do you feel about that, AI in society?
Yeah, I think there are things to be worried about, but I don't think it's what most people get hyped or told what to get worried about. Again, whenever I hear people talking about robotics taking jobs, just go watch a robot on a factory. Like any robot in the real world struggles, banging into a wall over and over. And on top of that, like, these systems are very fragile. Whereas biology, is resilient to some degree. So I am not worried about, a piece of software, at least at this point, doing something Terminator-like, taking over, taking me out. There is two things that do give me pause. One of which is just pure and simply misuse of a tool. And somebody using, again, ChatGPT to answer a question, getting a completely bogus answer, and then informing somebody else with that answer. Really no different than, Googling something, researching something on the internet, finding a forum, not looking at the sources and spitting out, regurgitating, whatever came from that. We've now, again, developed, a world where so many people just believe face value of what they see, and the AI will exacerbate that because, this has been trained. It's AI. It's smart. Yeah. I will just take it for what it's worth and go with that answer, and it's the completely wrong answer. So that one gives me pause. And then the second one is, I do think that my big sort of view of the world is that when we talk about the power of people and the power of decision making, there is we look at cultures or even regimes that have they're able to control a resource, like a natural resource, and they don't need a lot of people in those worlds to basically control government, control the economic means, and that creates a very poor outcome for the general population. Whereas you come to other countries where, like one we're in, where the economic value is derived a lot from human labor, human ingenuity, human insight, and that benefits all of us. The worry then would be, if you do have a technology that starts to allows that part of it to look more like, oil or gold or diamonds, in which you don't need a lot of people to kind of control it, that's not good for, the general welfare of people. So that to me is the other side of it. But I don't get worried that AI is going to take a job. I think it changes jobs. But yeah, there is some, I think, you have to go into it with kind of eyes wide open and, understand, what actions or what consequences could come from its use.
Yeah, that's great. Love those points and feedback. I definitely am the advocate for technology and stuff. And, a lot of people, especially, someone who works on AI, and people get afraid of oh, you're automating line work. Like, you're going to take our drafters' jobs, or I'm going to be out of a job. And, we just have to look at technology changes and things develop. And there are certain processes that might get replaced by different types of technology, whether it is robotics or it's autonomous or it's AI or automatic extraction or something. And instead of being afraid of that happening, it frees us up to shift to things that maybe the technology can't do yet. And, it's kind of the natural process, which is where I also just encourage people and companies is be innovative personally and as a company, and be willing to try new things and adopt new technologies and shift, because somebody's going to do it. And it'd be better to be that shifter who uses the technology to enhance how you work and your efficiencies than be so afraid or try to avoid improvement with technology that other people do it. And then you end up you do get left behind. And it's that saying of the technology won't replace you. The people using the technology might replace you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
Well, okay, I have one last question.
All right.
Whether you were to go back and give some advice to yourself, or maybe because you would have been younger, maybe it's even to encourage younger people now that are, 20 or something. They're coming out of high school, they're looking at career opportunities. Just with your advice, your journey through entrepreneurship, through business, through technology, what would you say to either encourage your younger self or younger people today in their journey ahead?
It's a great question. When I was a kid, I always hoped that I could time travel back to myself and tell myself, you're going to do great, But I'm glad now I couldn't, because I feel like that would have given me too much confidence. And I would have done poorly. So, it's hard. It's hard to say. I teach entrepreneurship. I actually, I do think it is an important skill set, at least for people to be aware of, because, in me now having, owned companies, built companies, led companies, and the times where I become, an employee of the company, I feel it does make you a better understanding how to be the support that, a company needs. I do, again, right out of, at the acquisition of my first company, I was like, oh yeah, everybody should be an entrepreneur. Now I'm like, maybe not. I do think there's some people who are more inclined, like I am. I cannot play guitar. I've tried countless times. I'm better off not. I think some people are gifted at it, and same thing goes with entrepreneurship. I think there are just some people who are very well versed at it, and enabling them, encouraging them is wonderful. And then I think there's some people who, you actually maybe end up doing them a bit of a disservice by saying, oh yeah, go build a company, leave your job, whereas they're much more comfortable, much more effective in working as part of the group and not necessarily venturing off and taking risk and building these things. I guess the one piece of advice is, and it's very cliche, but I think it's very applicable, which is just follow the thing that you're most passionate about. Like that, whether or not, again, coming back to what I said about, me living with myself, win or lose, I think if you're following what you feel is right for you, whether or not that is successful for you ultimately is irrelevant, because you got to do it you did it in the way that you felt was right. Whereas if you do what others tell you to do or recommend you do, and then you hate it, then you're going to hate yourself too, because you're like, well, this guy told me, or that person told me this is what I had to do, and I didn't do it. And it didn't work out. So I feel that follow the passion. I feel ultimately that will be successful, because if you do that, you're going to enjoy what you do. You're going to want to learn about it. You're going to want to help others get there. And so it'll be an overall better experience for you.
I love that. I love that response. You hit on a few different things there, and I think they're all very important. I agree with them. Some of us that fell into entrepreneurship, it wasn't this idea of just hey, I saw somebody create this platform and sell it. It's my turn. I'm gonna go make this. Sometimes it happens on accident because we're passionate about something, or we decide something wasn't working at a company, and we start and we grow, and but there is this thing, recently in society, I think that idea of entrepreneurship sometimes seems so enticing that it's like, I can just start it and be the most successful and sell it and retire early. And, you get into it and you realize it's not what it's cracked up to be, of you're working less and you're making more. And I think there are so many more people that are a number 2 or 3 or 5, and they fit really good roles, and they're going to be happier at that than trying on their own. Yet, if there are people who do have that bug, and you're willing to go through that hard work and you want to try it, don't maybe let the fear of it stop you from trying. I love all those points, agree with them. And the other big piece you said, I absolutely agree with, and I try to tell people this too, is if you're in a job you don't like because of the money, or you got stuck somewhere, or you felt like that's what you had to do, man, life is so much happier when you can find a industry or a role or a company to work in that's something you enjoy, and then you get to define what is success to you. Success is not always just monetary. It's you want that balance of life too, of enjoying it and enjoying time off and enjoying thinking about it. And so, pursuing what you're passionate about and working in that area. Love the points that you left with people.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you joining us today. We're going to wrap up there, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we have you on or talk with you. So thanks for joining us. Looking forward to sharing this out with the community and talking with you again soon. Thank you for joining us, Aaron.
That's wonderful. Thank you for inviting me on. This is awesome.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.